Welcome to CEO Perspective. I'm Dick Clark. I'm your host, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. You are in for a special treat today. It's not often that we get a chance to meet someone that spent over 40 years with NASA in various roles, which he's going to tell you about, but a gentleman that I had the honor of working with, and I've known him since the late 90s. So right after this, you're going to meet a very special, I call him a legend. He's too modest to consider himself one. But right after this, we're going to meet the former deputy director of the Kennedy Space Center. Stay with us. It's a special honor for me to introduce you to James L. Jennings, the former deputy director of the Kennedy Space Center, and much more. Jim, thank you so much for joining us today. And I can't wait for people to hear about your background. So, and I'm hoping that this storm is not going to be too bad, but obviously we're all concerned about the people with the storm that hit New Orleans. Jim, I think the first thing that people want to know is that you didn't start as the deputy director of the Kennedy Space Center. Can you take us back to how did you get to NASA to begin with, and what roles did you play before and after KSC?
Thank you, Dick. It's an honor to be with you today to talk a little about my career, but more importantly about NASA and some of the positions that had the honor of serving in during my almost 40 years with NASA. My career
Wow.
started at the Marshall Space Flight Center in 1967. And how I got to Marshall, I was a student at Alabama A&M University, where I was majoring in mathematics and minoring in physics. And I went down to the co-op office because I had gotten a little bored with school one semester, and I just lucky enough that they had a position open at Marshall Space Flight Center for a co-op, and I applied for that position and got it. And that was my first real introduction to NASA. I started as a computer operator in building 4200 in the basement. After graduation, I became a computer programmer at Marshall Space Flight Center, served in the computer lab for about 12 or 13 years, and then transferred over to the comptroller organization and got into doing budgets and resource managements and things that had a lot more visibility than computer programming. Transferred down to the Kennedy Space Center as branch chief doing resources for the Space Shuttle program, which was my real introduction to the Space Shuttle program. Had succeeding positions, head of a budget integration branch, division chief for resource management, which meant that we did all of the budget for the whole center. And from that position, I became deputy center comptroller. And the comptroller didn't look like he was going to retire, so I created another position, director of administration, and held that position until I became acting deputy center director in 1996. Jay Honeycutt brought me up to help him, and then Roy Bridges became center director, and I eventually got named deputy center director. After leaving Kennedy, I went to headquarters where I was an associate administrator for institutional management, which meant that I was responsible for the entire infrastructure of NASA, all the facilities, procurement, human resources, all of those areas. So I had a really rewarding career with NASA, not only for myself, but the people that I was able to work with and see them in positions today is most rewarding.
There was one thing about you that I tell that story every chance I get. But you were right at the top with Roy Bridges at the time. But you had a normal habit of going down to the cafeteria, and I never forgot it. You would just sit at any particular table, and the people who worked there just sat down, and you spoke with the folks. I never forgot that, but that they felt so comfortable with you. Was there any particular reason why that you did that, and you did that the entire time I was there? And people were always happy to see you and comfortable talking to you, and that's the culture that you established. But how did you get to do that?
Well, I always believe that you need to treat everybody with respect. And in order to do that, that meant that everybody in the organization was important, from the janitor to the security guard to the center director. They all was important and they all contributed. And I thought that the best way I could get to know the employees and find out what their problem was and how we could do things better was to spend time with them. So that's why I made myself available. During lunch hours, I had an open door policy, and people can say it was truly an open door policy. Anybody could come in to see me. So those were the points. I have about 5 or 6 points that I think is important to succeed in an organization. The first one, as I said, would treat everybody with respect. Everybody in the organization is important. Get to know your management, but more importantly, make sure your management get to know you. So that's what I was trying to do. Make sure that people's got to know me and do the best job that you can in the position you're in. I always say that the best way to get another position is to do an excellent job in the position you're in. So those was some of the things that I kind of guided my career by, and what I tried to impede into other people, that these are the things you can do and be successful in an organization. But more important, you treat everybody with respect and remember that everybody is important.
The thing that always amazed me is that, I don't remember how many people worked at headquarters, but there were a lot of people that worked there. But commonly, you would remember people's names. And you didn't have a special table that the same people sat at every time. Every time I'd see you down there, there would be different people talking, and you'd know them all by name. And I personally witnessed people coming up and talking to June and being able to get in to see you. And as a finance person, people in finance tend to be very focused on numbers, and they're not always as available because they're just so busy. But you took the time, and I think that's why so many people consider you such a legend at Kennedy. How has because you go back a long time, and I remember talking for years about what's going to happen after the shuttle program ends. But what in your mind are the biggest changes that you've seen since you left? Roy left, and they did name the highway, which I was very pleased that they did in his name. But what's different today than back in the shuttle program?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm really proud of is kind of the vision that Roy Bridges and I laid out about what Kennedy Space Center could become is becoming a reality today. If you remember, we worked on getting the industrial park started while the state of Florida built a building for us. We actually opened that land up for companies to lease and move in there. People thought we was kind of crazy at the time and saying that companies wouldn't come, but they did. You see the SpaceXs and all of those guys now. But we had a vision that Kennedy could become a true spaceport for commercial and government launches. And if you remember the rendition that we did with the big tower there and spaceships coming in and out, we're not quite there yet, but I think we're really on our way. So I think getting commercial guys more involved is one of the big changes that was a lot of resistance initially, but now it's being embraced in a way toward the future, and let NASA concentrate more on the more outer space things like going back to the moon, going to Mars, and developing technology for the far out space, and letting commercial take care of lower space. So I think that's probably been one of the biggest changes at Kennedy. And overall, that the agency has changed from a more center centric management to a more headquarters centric management, where the functional officers, people over procurement, all of the folks in the agency work for the folks at headquarters. So those are some of the changes that I've seen over the years since I left NASA.
You and I had an opportunity to talk to the recently named center director, Janet Petro. And as you know, because you watched the show, we were honored to have her as one of our guests on our CEO Perspective. And Janet has been very, very focused on partnerships with the private sector, and that was a dream back in the late '90s and the early 2000s. But I want to talk about something that I know that you're very passionate about, and that's education. A lot of people, in fact, we talked about it before we recorded this afternoon. A lot of people have such fascination with the Kennedy Space Center, and it is a major tourist attraction. But a lot of people don't think that there's a career, and they might consider it a place to go visit, but not necessarily a place in which to work. So, how do young people become interested in pursuing a career in space exploration and the planet Mars and all those things associated with NASA, just not at Kennedy, but in other centers that they have in the country?
Yes, NASA has a very robust education outreach program, and it may not be getting to everybody we need it to, but the program, we actually have material for elementary, high school, and even university that talks about the space program, the different careers that's available. But I think the most important way to get the kids is to have them to come and visit the Space Center uh, and have a hands-on. And we had a program where we did a virtual classroom presentations where we could show the VAB and all that, and we would integrate it with the teachers in the classroom uh, for whatever particular course they was teaching. So that's one way we can get into it. But I think we need to do more of that. We need to make things a little bit more exciting. We need to think about a virtual classroom where schools have a space day, and we have people from the centers and around NASA go visit the school. But more importantly, we have the technology available so that we can show them what's going on with the different processes of the vehicles that we have. So I think exposure is most important. I always talk about my grandkids. They was fortunate enough to be born into the space program, and so they just taken that to a whole different level where they are actually interested in astro physics, and doing all kind of things, and even teaching kids about telescopes and things like that. But the exposure is really important, especially in rural areas, inner city areas where people don't have access. to go to museums and things like that. We need to bring that to that community. You know, we used to have a space mobile that we could just take into community. We need to institute those kind of things and make sure that everybody interest is served in the space program.
What's exciting about today is that back in the days about which you just spoke, NASA was kind of the only game in town. There were a lot of subcontractors that provided the opportunity to work for them to support NASA as a contractor. But today, with so many private sector companies, there are many opportunities, and you don't necessarily have to be a genius in math or physics. There are so many jobs that will be available in that industry that any opportunity that becomes available you should look at. But if they're in school and there's so many students that are now looking at, am I going to go to a 4-year college or am I going to go to a technical college? What should I do? What advice should we be giving young people to, number one, encourage them to explore the space industry? But also, if they do want to do that, these are the areas that they should become familiar with and take courses in school to learn more about them.
You know, very important that we get kids started early uh, in studying math and science. And then they can determine once they become high schoolers whether they want to go on and get a 4-year degree or whether they want to become some technicians. There are many jobs in the space program that doesn't require a degree. A lot of the technicians are, you know, they're just trained in specific areas, and we need those guys almost as much as we need the engineers and the scientists and things like that because they are the ones that actually put this thing together. So I would say, you know, study math and early on science, and then once you become a high schooler, go take a trade. I mean, they have it now where you can take courses at trade schools and college while you're still in high school. Go and do some of those things. Try to get a summer intern job at NASA, one of the space companies, or some technical organization so that you're exposed to the kind of career that's possible. We here in Huntsville took a bunch of kids out to the Toyota plant, and I was surprised at the number of jobs that they had that didn't require the degrees, where people's actually making six figures. You know, if you're a maintenance technician that can actually fix things, it's becoming more computerized now where robots are doing things. You need to be able to repair and operate the robots. So there are many careers that doesn't require a degree. Uh, but if you wanted to study, get a degree, you need to start studying your math early on. I would say elementary school and continue studying it on through high school so that you can get into the right field. Don't wait till you become a junior or senior and decide you want to be an engineer because if you haven't taken the relative background math and science, you're not going to be able to be successful.
I shared a story with you before we started the show this afternoon about one of my middle son's friends who was interested in Kennedy but didn't know much about it. And through your help, we got him a tour, and he has worked his way up at Kennedy and is still working there. And I bet you it's been 20 years that he has worked at Kennedy. But I do want to mention one thing about diversity. I was so excited to hear from Janet, as I know you were as well, that the Artemis, once it lands and establishes operations on the moon, we're going to have the first female and the first person of color among the crew that will land with the Artemis on the moon. And I think that's a giant step, pardon the expression, a giant step forward. And I think that Kennedy, I always know him as Senator Bill Nelson, will be very sensitive to making sure that NASA represents and serves everyone. And they've done a great job of putting women in leadership positions and minorities in space. So it really is a great place. Jim, as I told you earlier, after just amazing when you think how long we've known one another and we see each other every week when you religiously attend our council, our CEO roundtable, and you bring such value to that organization, and we really appreciate that. But I want to thank you for taking time this afternoon, and I will see you tomorrow at the CEO roundtable. So, Jim, thank you so much for everything you've done for the nation, for NASA, for my organizations, and for me personally. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick, for having me. I've truly enjoyed this, and it's always good to talk about the space program, and always good to talk about how we get more minorities and young people interested in the space program. So thank
That's
you.
for sure.
Enjoyed it.
Well, you've met a hero of mine. I could tell you story after story about Jim, and he is just, here he is. It's been a long time since he was in that position. When you think about back to the end of the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s. But he's still working and he's still helping and he's still mentoring and he's still encouraging and motivating and as passionate as ever. But he never forgot how important people are. And if there's one takeaway that you should leave here today is what he talked about, respecting people and value people. That's important. Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, every Tuesday, 4 o'clock, we're going to be talking to someone about something important. So we'll see you next Tuesday at 4 o'clock.